And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us here. Updates on really the biggest story of the week, the most tragic. Back out live there over the Minneapolis skyline at the moment. Well, the shooter who killed 2 Catholic school students and wounded more than a dozen youngsters sitting in the pews of that Minneapolis Church, Annunciation Church. Well, he once attended the same school and was quote-unquote obsessed with the idea of killing children. That is what the authorities told us today. Our friend and colleague, Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen, he's been down on the ground all day. He filed this report outside the crime scene. Let's listen.
This shooting happened just days into the new school year, and now it's being investigated as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime against Catholics. Flowers and pictures sitting near Annunciation Catholic School and Church in Minneapolis, remembering the 2 children killed when a shooter opened fire during morning mass. 17 others were injured, including some who protected other students.
My friend Victor, he was laying on top of me, making sure I was safe, and he got hit.
Police are still piecing together a motive, but say they are reviewing a manifesto and videos posted online. Investigators also executed 4 search warrants Wednesday night to learn more about the shooter, reportedly a former student whose mother is a former employee of the church.
The question is, who did what when they learned about it? Who did they talk to?
The shooter had 3 legally purchased weapons, a rifle, shotgun, and pistol. The 23-year-old wrote messages on magazines, including, "Where is your God?" for the children, and "Kill Donald Trump."
It went on for 3 or 4 minutes. For continual fire for that long is a lot of ammo that was spent.
Many in this community are just beginning to process this tragedy. Hundreds gathered for a vigil Wednesday night to remember the victims.
How tragic that was. And yet in the midst of that, there was courage, there was bravery, but most especially there was love.
The rest of the injured victims are all expected to survive, though some needed surgery. In Minneapolis, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thanks so much. So some more updates there on X today from the city of Minneapolis saying this, that the Minneapolis Police Department is coordinating with the St. Paul Police Department, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and other local law enforcement agencies across the metro area to expand patrols around all schools within Minneapolis over the next couple of weeks. So it looks like they're ramping up security at many of these schools in the area. Also saying updates following yesterday's shooting at the Church of the Annunciation, saying one additional child was identified as injured from the shooting, saying 4 search warrants were executed at the church and 3 other locations around the metro. Additional firearms were recovered here. All right, in the meantime, we do want to get into more on this, some of these developments, some of these updates with our friend of Berna Law Enforcement, Josh Sherrard. He joins me. Josh, thanks for being with us. I know we dispatch you all the time to come on and discuss these extremely tragic events here. And I know you've been following this really, really closely, and this is really hard. And I want to just ask you this. Have you ever seen such a hate-filled manifesto? With all the mass shootings you've responded to, that you've covered, that you've opined on television, have you ever seen a shooter like this admire so many past mass shooters?
Yeah, it's a very unique case in the fact that the hatred was so widespread. Many times when we see these mass shooters and these mass attacks, they're really targeting, or the message is sent for a specific body of persons. It's specific to a religion or a demographic or a regional type of person. But very rarely do we see that somebody's just, he literally wrote, "I hate you all." It's just, there's such a widespread hatred, which is what's going to make some of really developing the specific motive very difficult here. Obviously there was some ideological messages that he was trying to send, and there was some kind of targeted hate here and there. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to say, where did this absolute just evil hatred start, and how did it manifest into such tragic and horrific event. So the looking up to the other mass shooters, unfortunately over the last 25 years, this is not a new event. So seeing that and laying those blueprints obviously helped him conduct this horrific event. And that's, that's something we haven't seen a whole lot of in the past. We've seen some events that were like other shootings and some that clearly they took cues from, but to kind of collect all of these other mass shootings and to really study those attackers and those shooters is really something that's fairly unique to this shooting.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, during these horrible events as journalists, you try to, or at least attempt to, get into the psychology of someone who would carry this out, to understand their motivation, even as incomprehensible as it might be. On this YouTube channel where he posted the video manifesto, these videos, police say, may have been posted by the shooter. They show weapons and ammunition. They list the names of previous mass shooters. Also, what appears to be a suicide note to family contains a confession of long-held plans to carry out a shooting, and also talk of being deeply depressed. Robin Westman, this 23-year-old here. And I have to ask, during these events, ex post facto, after they take place, you try to wonder, what were the warning signs? Mass shooters, they have people in their life. They have family. They have people that know them, coworkers, friends. And you have to just ask yourself, were any red flags acknowledged or noticed with this particular individual? And if so, why were they not, interdicted before something like this could have been taken place here? And so that is the question. What if something had been done? That's a right question to ask. It's almost an impossible answer to get, though, right, Josh?
It is, and it's a question we've been asking for the better part of 3 decades. We go back to the Columbine shooting, which is really kind of the first active school shooter of the modern era. And since then, we've been asking the same question. How do we identify those that are more likely to conduct these horrible attacks than those that are just troubled teens, than those that are just having mental issues that might manifest with the same certain symptoms, so to speak, or the same red flags, but are never going to absolutely manifest into these horrible attacks? Because that's what we're seeing. We look at all of these shooters in the past, and we try to identify some similarities between them, and it's very difficult to identify some of those similarities. They're unique to those that are going to go and conduct these mass shootings, as opposed to those that we see every day with teens that are struggling with depression and identity issues. So yeah, that's the question, is how deeply do we go into taking those flags and then just absolutely delving into their life and restricting them in certain ways? It's an ideological line of where do we start violating somebody's privacy in order to protect everyone else? And that's really the struggle and the question that we have been trying to answer for, like I said, the better part of 3 decades.
So, Josh, this shooter, Westman, 23 years old, he bought all the weapons he used in the rampage. He bought them legally, so nothing was, flagged in his background when he went to purchase the weapons. We were told he purchased them recently before the shooting here. No criminal record. I think he had a traffic ticket on his record. That's about it. He went to the school. There's some reporting to suggest that the week before the shooting took place, he went to the very school, sat inside the church under the guise of coming back to the Catholic faith. But what he was really doing was kind of assessing and surveying the layout of the very church inside here. And I want to talk about where the parents stand in this. We learned this today. Fox's Bill Malugin posted this on X, saying Minneapolis PD says they have not been successful in speaking with the mass shooter's mother, and they aren't commenting on if they were able to make contact with his father. It's been more than 24 hours since the shooting. How unusual is that? What can law enforcement do to compel cooperation with the parents of the shooter? This is unusual, is it not?
Actually, I would say it's actually fairly unique in this case, in the fact that they're just not cooperating. But when we look at all those mass shooters before, this is actually one of the similarities that we do see, and that's a lack of involvement, in the life from those parents. Unfortunately, like you said, at what point do the police get involved with, these red flags that we see? And once again, there's just so many out there and so many other kids and adults that are suffering from this. The police just don't have the resources to do that. That's why in cases like this, it's so important for those parents to be involved. And a lot of times, what we see in these mass shooters is these red flags that have persisted throughout the years, and the people that would be closest to them, their parents, just are nowhere to be found. In several mass shooting incidents, we see that the kid or the teenager would be gone for 3 and 4 days at a time, and the parents would have no idea where they are, and that was just normal behavior. So, in many times we see those parents trying to cooperate as much as they can, but now we're starting to see some resistance, and this may have something to do with the fact that in different regions of the country, parents are starting to be held responsible for the actions of these mass shooters. Now, of course, Robin was an adult at 23 years of age, so parents' culpability is non-existent. But the black mark across their family is going to be there, and unfortunately, without any kind of cooperation with the police from the family, it's going to continue to be. So as we move forward, it's going to be interesting to see if the mother is willing to cooperate more, or if the police are just going to have to use legal means to get that information out.
Okay, so if that does happen, let's talk about legal means just briefly. I mean, if they remain uncooperative, are they going to arrest the parents?
It's very doubtful that they're going to be able to, just because that unless they can definitively prove that they are hindering the investigation, which they may, depending on the information that they have available. If they have found information that's material to say that the parents had some knowledge that this may happen, or were privy to the understanding that they had guns, or that they were going to use those for a nefarious purpose, then at that point they may have enough to compel an arrest, to compel a warrant for hindering that investigation, and really try to start leaning on mom and trying to find dad in order to get some more of that information out. So that's really where we're looking is do they have that compelling information to be able to do that?
Josh, just lastly, where in this investigation are you looking for next? What are you watching for?
I'm really watching for what is, kind of what we learn from this on the logistical side and the protection side. We have a general understanding of motive. Where that motive started, that's going to be another question that needs to be answered. Where did all this come from? Is there other sources? Were there accomplices, maybe not physical accomplices, but were there other people that had a hand in convincing, Robin to do this? Was there other people that knew this was going to happen? Where did some of this come from? And then what steps are we going to take as a community, as a state, and as a nation to keep this from happening? We can't really, when we can't spot the individuals this is going to happen with, now how are we going to harden these targets? We're going to learn from this incident. And this is one of the very first times that we've seen an active shooter actually outside the building shooting inside. That's one of the most unique things about this shooting. So now, as a law enforcement officer and as an active shooter expert, now I'm looking at, all right, how are we going to start pivoting to protect this from happening in the future?
Yeah, that's something I noted on the air just yesterday, how unique that was. He chose not to go inside of the very target that he selected. He chose to commit his rampage from outside. What about the private public here, that aspect? This is a Catholic school. They don't get federal dollars or state dollars for security. Do we have to have that conversation?
We absolutely do, and it's not necessarily a funding issue. It's a resource issue. We have a lot of private schools, charter schools throughout the country that don't fall under federal funding or federal or state department regulation. So those schools generally have a little bit more latitude on what they can and can't do inside their own school. Like you said, it's a private school there, so they need to start having a conversation with the rest of the parents that go to that school saying, how are we going to protect your children? What are we going to do in this school to raise that ability to protect your children? Is it armed personnel inside the school? Is it metal detectors? Is it, locked doors? There's plenty of measures that can be taken that don't include any, armed personnel or metal detectors, anything like that. But are we taking those measures, and are we going to start, requesting more funds in order to implement some of those protection measures? Because at this point, that's what we know works. We know that if we harden the target, if we train the individuals, what kind of training are they doing? Are they doing lockdown drills? Does faculty understand how to respond to an active shooter event? You know, we need to start looking inward to say, what can we do in the future to harden these targets? And that school is going to have to make that choice as well, and start understanding where they can better place resources to help keep those kids safe.
All right, Josh Gerard, thanks so much for being on with us and helping us make sense of this very, very difficult story to tell. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Okay, in the meantime here, let's take a quick commercial break. Though when we come back, we're staying in Minneapolis. What we're going to do when we come back, in replay, you're going to watch the latest update we got from law enforcement on where their investigation is taking them. You'll see it when we